I'm Dayne Young with UGAsports.com, and we have a special podcast for you. If you're listening to this, it'll be a voice that you're familiar with from Sanford Stadium. If you're watching, it may not be a face that you recognize quite as much. It is Brook Whitmire, the public address announcer at Sanford Stadium. Brook, how long have you done that for the Bulldogs?
Dayne, thank you for having me, first of all, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but Lord willing, this next season is about to be my 30th season, so it's been a minute.
I was going to say, I think you've done it virtually my entire life. And that's actually the case, not to try to age you at all, but it's almost the case. It's not quite, but at least in my memory, you've been the voice in Sanford Stadium.
Sure.
Why don't you just, first of all, give our listeners kind of an update to who you are and what you do, because obviously 6 or 7 games out of the year is not enough to be a full-time employee for something.
Sure. Well, Dayne, my wife Jennifer and I are pleased to both be graduates of UGA, and we moved back here to Athens with our family in 2004. We've got a daughter, Allie, who's a junior at UGA, and our son, James, is a senior at Oconee County High School. And my day job, so to speak, I'm proud to say, is to work as the Chief Human Resources Officer for Oconee County Schools. I was a high school teacher and coach for a number of years and a high school administrator, and then sort of got into the HR side of things. And so that's the Monday through Friday gig.
So those Saturdays, though, are what most people would know you from. How did you first get connected to begin doing that almost 30 years ago?
You know, there's a short answer and a long answer to that, Dayne. The short answer is I had the privilege of, while I was at Georgia, my first 3 years, I was actually a trainer for the football team on Coach Dooley's last 3 teams, and then was given the good opportunity to work in the sports information office under Claude Felton, who, as you know, is the GOAT of sports information directors for sure, and still going strong. I'm going to date him a little bit. He's still going at it after all these years. And back in those days, we had a JV team, and every now and again they would need someone to announce those games or fill in on G-Day and that sort of thing, which I did some in the late 1980s. And then in 1992, the guy that was the voice I grew up listening to in Sanford Stadium, Larry England, great man, great announcer who was a radio guy here in Athens, he moved away, and Claude called me one day and asked if I'd like to give that a shot. And I was actually in banking for a couple of years out of college before I went into high school teaching. And so gratefully had that opportunity. That's the shorter version. The longer version is my dad, who graduated from Georgia in 1950, and back when the rules were different, was heavily involved in football recruiting. He didn't get married until he was 37. He was in the insurance business. And back then, there were a handful of guys like him who traveled with the team and who recruited heavily for Georgia, even though that wasn't their job. So growing up, all I knew was going to Sanford Stadium on Saturdays, and dating myself again, made my first trip there with Dad and my family in 1976, and had to miss one game in 1981 and haven't thankfully missed one since then. So I owe my involvement with Georgia to my dad and to that upbringing that was so fortunate to have.
Where did you grow up?
Grew up just outside of Atlanta. In fact, I say Atlanta, it's really closer to the Tucker area. And grew up there, lived in one house. And I tell people we were the picture of stability. I grew up in one house, and Georgia had one coach all those years, Vince Dooley. And so Georgia was something that was in my blood from an early age, for sure.
Almost inevitable, right? With Herschel Walker in those years with the national championship in 80, like that was everything in this state.
It sure was. And Dayne, I think back on it. And so starting in about, as I said, 1976, I might have gone to one in 1975, but I know 76, beginning with that year. So what was that? 4 years of, the 70s, and then all of a sudden Herschel Walker, and those 4 years afterwards are my kind of frame of reference to winning championships and seeing certainly as good of a college football player as ever played in Herschel. So I was spoiled pretty good growing up. That's for certain.
So you get the call from Claude Felton, and I think anyone that gets a call from Claude, it's either really good or, I guess in some cases in media, it could be really bad.
That's right.
What was your reaction to that phone call?
Dan, I don't know if I've ever been asked that. I certainly was thankful for the opportunity. Thinking back on it now, I was young. I was 24 years old. So I was really grateful to be given that opportunity. It was very much something I think that was going to be, from Claude's standpoint and from UGA's standpoint, on an interim basis, which I certainly understood, while they decided whether or not they wanted to go another route. And so, man, it was just, for me personally, and I know the Bulldogs out there understand this. If you grew up going to Sanford Stadium and going to those games as I did and as countless others have, it was just a privilege, and it still is. It's an honor to be associated with game day and to have that role, and it's fun. So I was excited. I was fired up and was hoping I could pass the test, so to speak.
So you get that call from Claude. I'm assuming the first call you make then is to your dad, from what it sounds like.
I don't recall, Dane, but if it wasn't the first, it would be close. And so that certainly was a fun moment with him, for sure.
Do you have a favorite moment since '92 being the voice in Sanford Stadium?
With that, I do get asked that a lot, Dane, and it's interesting as a fan, which I am, and we all are. And of course, there's a certain limit that has to come with that. I can't yell as loud in the home games as I like to the road games, but I think for any fan, the answer that I would give is probably like a lot of fans over the years. There are several that stand out in no particular order. Certainly Notre Dame in 2019 was a one for the ages. The blackout game with Auburn was huge and fun. One of the games I remember, and you would have been really young at this time, Dane, is in 2000. Seems hard to imagine now, but we had lost to Tennessee 9 years in a row. And we beat them. And that was the one and only time in Sanford Stadium history that the crowd was pretty much allowed, if you will, to rush the field, tear down the goalposts, and beating Tennessee was sweet. You'll recall a couple of games in 2013 that were awesome, the LSU game and South Carolina game. I think LSU, if my memory serves, that was the first year we won a game when game day was there, which was a hump that we needed to get over. So there have been a lot of special days between the hedges. And frankly, as we all know, there have been a few painful days as well. That's for sure.
For a game like the blackout, what information do you know before other people, if any? Because obviously that was a pretty tight kept secret.
That was as tightly kept a secret as I've ever seen in Athens. And I will tell you that I didn't know. Had my suspicions and had my reasons to think certain things were going to happen, but Georgia did a great job. Emily Dietz, who works kind of overseeing all of the game day production, did a fantastic job with that, working with the team and with Coach Richt and everybody. And it's quite a moment when the Dogs took the field in black, that's for sure. And we had to win. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, gosh, if we do all this, we can't lose. And then thankfully we didn't.
What's your preparation like? Because I don't think I've done a little bit of public address announcing myself for some of the other UGA sports over the last 3 or 4 years. I don't think a lot of people understand how little reaction time you actually have and such a small window that you're working in on the microphone.
Dane, that's one thing I didn't understand either when I was getting into it. And it's something that's interesting that's changed over the years. And again, I'm dating myself and anybody else who was around then. When I started, thinking back on it, teams went into huddles. I mean, there wasn't a hurry up offense. There wasn't this fast paced action. And so basically when a play ends and I'm calculating in my mind the gain, the down, the distance, I've got a spotter who works with me who's telling me maybe the number of who made the tackle. Well, all that's going on. Back then you had a little time, and now with the hurry up, it is fast and it is a challenge. That's probably the biggest challenge of the job when things are moving really quickly, because I certainly don't want to be talking over the quarterback, standing over center in the shotgun, as the case may be. So that's a big part of it, just getting ready for that. I like to be obviously as familiar as possible with the other team. With our guys, I will know our folks pretty much by heart, but each week there's another team, there's another set of pronunciations and whatnot. And Dane, I would tell you also that probably the biggest change, there's a ton of non-game preparation to do, if you will, because over the course of the years, there's been a proliferation and other things that take place during the game. There's a lot of video production. There are a lot of PSA reads. There are a lot of presentations that go on, all that require preparation. So the in-game stuff takes some preparation, but so does the non-game stuff as well.
And I think a lot of fans think that a lot of that may be pre-recorded, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, if it's a pre-rolled video, then whatever that narration is, yes, that is pre-recorded. But otherwise, if it's your voice, that's you live in the moment, correct?
Correct. It is live in the moment. There were a couple of years there where we tried some pre-recorded stuff and some university presentations. And it was okay, but there's nothing like a live read, and it's a lot easier to do it that way. But I say a lot easier. It can be challenging, certainly, but I think the production's better when it's live. So yeah, they're, for better or worse, when the dogs hear me talk, or when Dog Nation hears me talk, it's what you hear is what you get in the moment.
How did you come up with kind of the crutch phrases, I guess, or the things that you kind of become known for, the first down, Georgia? I mean, I know you, like, again, a small window, so you don't have a ton of words to work with as a radio broadcaster might, but do you fall into those? Do they kind of happen over time? Do you try new things from time to time, or are you at the point where you've kind of got your staples?
Definitely don't want to be afraid to try new things, and I don't want to stop growing in this role like any other role. I will tell you that early on in the early 90s when I started, I think it was toward the end of the first year or the beginning of the second, I felt like we needed something to sort of declare why it is that we're there. And out of that, it's Saturday in Athens was born. I think one Saturday I just said it and said it's time to tee it up between the hedges, and that kind of stuck after that. Growing up, having the good fortune of going not only to Georgia games, but also to all the other stadiums around the Southeastern Conference, I've learned and picked up other things along the way. I know that it used to be that when you went into Neyland Stadium, you heard it's football time in Tennessee. And that was sort of and in fact, I think that's still said there. And then other things along the way just kind of came. Certainly my role is not to be a cheerleader and not trying to do that. But at the same time, I'm excited when we get a first down. We want Dog Nation to be excited. So I'm not going to lie and say that there's not some enthusiasm in my voice when I say that. So some of that's evolved over time. I know the best advice I ever got was to just be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. Develop your own style. I'm sure some people out there don't like it. I know, in fact, I kind of take this as a badge of honor sometimes if I hear an opposing team say, "Gosh, we hate when your guy says first down Georgia," or whatever. Well, that's okay. But I always want to just do my best and be myself.
Is there a favorite name that you have gotten to pronounce with regularity over the big microphone?
Gosh, that's a terrific question, Dane. The first one that comes to mind, mainly because I botched it despite all kinds of preparation, Muhammad Massaquoi was a great name. And I had practiced that name. I had memorized it. I was going to get it right. And he made a big catch, his first catch in a Georgia uniform, if my memory serves. And it was so exciting in the moment that I botched it. And I knew that I had, and something in my mind said, "Oh, you just said that wrong." So I had to go back and restudy it. But there have been some doozies. We get some of those Cajun schools in here, Louisiana Lafayette and some others, and it'll take a minute to memorize or to get some of those right for sure. But you always want to get it right. I mean, this as a journalism guy. I mean, if you're going to do it, you need to get it right, and it needs to be right. I had the good fortune of spending a good bit of time with Dan McGill, who was a dear friend of my dad's for decades, and some other folks, Claude being one of them, that you need to get it right for sure.
I'm now thinking back. I'm wanting to know if Muhammad Massaquoi and Devin Aroma-Shadu would have been on opposite possessions. I'll have to see if those years line up.
That's a great question. They might have been. And Henry To'o last year at Tennessee, who's now at Bama, of course, with all the transfer changes, was a doozy as well.
I guess lucky for you, you get to avoid DJ Uiagalelei for a whole game.
Well, you just did something, Dane, that I have no idea how to do, because I've seen that young man's name and I've not even tried it yet. Yeah, if they were coming to Athens, which I wish they were. Side note is that, gosh, It's exciting to play Clemson and anytime, anywhere. But I grew up, we went to Death Valley every other year, and they came here, and it's an hour and 15 minutes away. And I'll put my little editorial in here. I don't care what's happening with college football and scheduling and conferences and expansion. Georgia and Clemson should play every year.
Dabo Swinney said the same thing on this channel just 2 weeks ago.
Interesting. Well, that's one thing Dabo and I can agree on for sure.
And Kirby Smart might as well. That's a question I suppose we need to ask him at this point.
Sure.
I tell people all the time that as I got into media, because I grew up in Georgia, I grew up a fan of Georgia, I graduated from UGA, I work on campus now, and I say all that, but when there's a job to be done, you have to do the job professionally. And especially coming through the Grady College of Journalism, as you and I both did, that's what you're trained to do. And if you don't do that, then you're not doing the job. So I say all that to say is your role's a bit different, where you can be more excited when Georgia does something positive. You can have a little bit more energy of fan inflection because you're doing a service for the team and the stadium. But how do you manage that and at the same time convey the information that you have to convey?
I love how you describe that, Dane, and I completely agree with what you said. It's always important to do it right and do it professionally. One of the best compliments that I can receive, and thankfully have received along the way, is that when we lose a huge game or something incredibly disappointing happens, and someone will say afterwards, golly, how did you just so calmly say, hey, thank you for your attendance, and the final score is Tennessee, whatever, Georgia, whatever. And it's just that very thing that was drilled into me at a young age by my dad, and certainly through journalism school and Claude and everyone else. We always want to remain professional. However, there is a line there. There's a fine line between being excited and showing enthusiasm. I know some people would say, well, gosh, all you need to do is sit there and read something methodically. And to me, that would kind of like be the same thing as saying, well, all the scoreboard is for is to tell the score. Well, the scoreboard has evolved and does a lot more than that these days. So it's something that's always in the back of my mind, that I want to be excited. I want to help any way I can to help create the best possible atmosphere for Georgia football to succeed and win the right way. But at the same time, it's always in the back of my mind to remain professional, particularly when things don't go our way, or maybe when we see a penalty flag down there that we all thought was not necessarily the correct call to be made, or I don't know, a Hail Mary happens at the end of the Tennessee game and you hear the Tennessee coaches behind you celebrating and you're in shock like the rest of the Georgia people. So it's always at the forefront of my mind to do it the right way. And hopefully that's the case.
How would you assess how that atmosphere has evolved since the 90s? Because from the seat that you're at, you've literally seen the stadium grow in that amount of time.
I will say this, Dane, and I'm very thankful and proud of the Georgia people and our fans to say this. Sanford Stadium has become, over the course, in my experience there, it's become a much tougher place for the opponent to play. And it wasn't always that way. It's the best place in the world to watch a game. I've thought that since the moment I walked in there. And I think for a while we had the reputation, probably rightfully so, of getting loud at certain times when everybody gets loud. But over the course of these years, I tell you what, somewhere along the way, late 90s, early 2000s, it really began to shift to where it's a lot more difficult for folks. And it's just wonderful. I think we've got the best fans in the world, and I think they understand when they go to South Carolina or to Auburn or to Alabama or wherever, that the crowd makes a difference. And any team, any player, any coach will tell you that. So I think it's gotten a lot better, but at the same time, we can always improve. And we want to make it such that when people talk about the toughest places to play, that Sanford Stadium is at the top of that list.
I'll tell you a difference that I've noticed, because in 2015, the overtime game against Georgia Southern, when Sony Michel runs that ball into the end zone in overtime, he ran right in front of my television camera when I was working in local TV. And the difference that I realized, and I think maybe it's just being on field level that I got this as compared to being in the stands beforehand when I was younger. But those games that, it's overtime against Georgia Southern. Traditionally, that's probably not a spot that Georgia wants to be in or thinks that it should be. And definitely the fans don't think that Georgia should have been in that moment. But however, when that happened, there was still the stadium pandemonium and euphoria as if it were a Notre Dame or as if it were a close game against Oklahoma or someone like that. So that's at least where I've seen it elevate, where I think fans kind of understand that they actually can make a difference in the game. I'm curious if you've seen that same evolution of maybe fans seeing what value they bring.
I think it's a great point, Dan. You're exactly right. And I remember precisely what you're talking about. And I know a lot of people were saying after the game, we shouldn't be so excited. We should have never gone to overtime. Listen, Georgia Southern is a tough team to play. They always are. And anytime you win, you need to be excited. Conversely, I know there have been times, and sometimes it might be because it's a noon kickoff or the weather may not be great, but you'll hear people say, gosh, we walked in the stadium, and this could be any stadium, not just ours, but you'll hear people say, we walked in the stadium and it just wasn't alive. And it just sort of set this kind of tone of not the most excited in the world. And the team came out a little bit flat. And so it really, really makes a difference. But yeah, to your point, the level of intensity has got to be up high, and it's got to be there whether we're playing Notre Dame or whether we're playing a non-conference opponent. Every game's important. Everybody's got players now. I mean, there's not you may be favored to win in a big game, but those schools that are coming that are big underdogs to Georgia, they have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And sometimes it might feel like we have nothing to gain and everything to lose. But the difference in all of that is the crowd, and the difference is the atmosphere. And if it's so loud on third down that quarterback has to call a timeout to be able to hear, then that's a good sign. If it's not, then that's just one other thing that our team has to overcome to win.
I hadn't thought about this, but with these upcoming home schedules and some of the non-conference, and who knows what that's going to look like with all the conferences becoming jumbled, but that just got to get you jazzed up a little bit to see what's coming in your future.
As I said earlier, Dayne, no question, I'm a fan like everybody else, and the landscape certainly is changing. But yes, it's exciting to think about Oklahoma coming between the hedges, Texas coming between the hedges, and those schedules. If it were up to me, and I go back to the great year of 1980, our non-conference opponents that year in Sanford Stadium, Texas A&M, Clemson, South Carolina was a non-conference opponent at the time, had George Rogers, the Heisman winner, and of course the Tech game. So we played TCU in Sanford Stadium that year. A couple of years afterwards, Brigham Young came, UCLA. So if it were up to me, it'd be SEC games and marquee non-conference games. I know that's not reality for a lot of reasons, but the bigger the better as far as I'm concerned.
Let me quickly, before we wrap, ask you just about life around Athens, because we'd mentioned that, people may not recognize your face, but have you ever been sitting at a restaurant and people be trying to figure out, where do I know that voice from?
Yes, Dayne, and I will tell you that it's always encouraging when that happens. And what it always reminds me is that we all love the University of Georgia, and we love the Dogs, and we love Sanford Stadium. And it's encouraging, and I always appreciate it. And it's always kind when people say nice things, or when they come up and they've recognized my voice or seen my name somewhere. But honestly, what it always reminds me of is those childhood days myself, coming as a fan, and everything about the experience was special. Whether that's you're sitting with your family, or whether that's you tailgate with the same people and you reunite every year, or whether that's the feeling when the Redcoats take the field, or where the PA announcer talks, whatever it is, the common denominator is we all love Georgia. And when somebody says that I've somehow been a part of that, that's tremendously encouraging.
And I think it's important to note that you're the voice, but it's such a large orchestration of people that make that atmosphere possible, that you're a piece of it. And I'm not trying to diminish what you do in any way, but just try to give credit to the army of people that create what that is on Saturdays.
It is unbelievable. And whether that's the Redcoats that are out there in the heat and they're practicing all week long, all night long. I go running sometimes around the intramural fields and they're out there practicing, whether it's all of the work that goes into the amazing video productions just the whole atmosphere. There was a lot of effort that went into getting the lights that we have. There's a whole bunch of people involved in that. My man, Sir Foster, who's the best DJ that's ever walked earth, as far as I'm concerned, knowing when to play what. And it's all because we want the University of Georgia to be the best, and to be a small part of that is an honor. Sure it is.
And because I do work at UGAsports.com and the dogment is a thing, I'm not asking you these questions, but I do just want to point out that Brook does not have the authority of what music is played over.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
He does. He doesn't select the songs.
The emails and the questions I've gotten through the years, that I understand, we all love it, but it's like, you can't please everybody, that's for sure. And it's those folks at UGA and the promotions and Emily and her team, and they all do such an amazing job. But if there's 92,746 people there, not all of them are going to like the song or this or the video or what the PA guy says or what the band plays. And so you just have to press on and do your best, and hopefully the scoreboard is the way we all want it to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, typically, if the thing that's remembered is something that was in all that orchestration, that probably means it wasn't as good of a day as it needed to be in Sanford Stadium. And just again, I'm not even asking you to comment on this, but I know the dog vent is very polarized on the Spell Georgia cheer. When the script is put out there, the PA announcer does the job.
Well, and you know what? I will say this: love it or hate it. That is one thing. I don't do the Spell Georgia cheer. That's been a part of the Redcoat script forever. And Tom Jackson, who's been the Redcoat band announcer since the 70s, and I grew up listening to him, he has the responsibility of doing that. So that's not something that falls in my purview, but it is interesting. We've changed that. It used to be at halftime. Now it's before the game. So am I hearing you say that I'm not familiar with that much. Is there a lot of chatter around that?
A lot of, and now
question?
That's the question of if you think the members of the dog vent are representative of the fan base as a whole. I think a lot are. I think a lot are very vocal on there. They probably wouldn't be as vocal in person. Some people just don't think it has the energy that you want. Maybe because it has moved to pregame rather than halftime. I don't know the answer specifically. I just know that it's kind of a common thought that music and the Spell Georgia cheer are two of the things that people tend to complain about.
The most. Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, this time that you've promised me has flown by, and hopefully we get a chance and our paths cross again, Brook. Can't thank you enough for making time for us over at UGAsports.com. And I guess I'll just finish with this question is, I know 2020 was difficult from an energy standpoint and everything in that stadium. All signs are pointing to hopefully we'll have packed out stadiums once again here in 2021. If you just want to give voice to what that experience was like with kind of a reduced capacity, and then kind of the excitement that you have as the voice of Sanford Stadium for it to return back to life, so to speak.
Well, certainly, Dayne, it was, as everyone knows, it was different and it was unprecedented. But I'm frankly, it's affecting me thinking about it right now. I was amazed at how the Georgia people, and I've heard a lot of people say this, and this was my thought, the atmosphere that we had, particularly that Auburn game, was unbelievable. And the fans came through and did everything they possibly could to make it as good atmosphere as we could have. And to think about, Dayne, and I've been thinking about it for a lot of days, like most dogs have, but to think about being back in Sanford Stadium on September 11th, no less, back together, all 92,000 plus of us, hopefully coming off a big win up in Charlotte, is unbelievable. And I believe we're going to be back with a vengeance. I believe the Dogs are. I believe the stadium is. I believe the university starting class today is. And I'm telling you, I can't wait. And I know that I'm not alone in that sentiment.
That's Brook Whitmire. He's the voice of the Georgia Bulldogs in Sanford Stadium. And Brook, you're Georgia through and through. It's behind you in this Zoom interview that we're doing, but for where you were as a kid, where you graduated, and what you do professionally, you're a dog through and through. I think our audience is really going to enjoy having heard some of your story and get to know you a little better. And we appreciate your time for that.
Thanks so much, Dayne. I appreciate the opportunity, and go Dogs.